coming to writing new, think of place as like one of these elements that you have to include. Like you've got to have a setting, you've got to have characters, et cetera, et cetera. I think place is often underrated in as far as its importance in writing. For me, it comes first, absolutely. I mean, I have a very strong sense of place just about wherever I am, and so I think of place as having its own personality, I remember taking a class here from Jason Morrow many, many years ago, where he where he walked. He's still here, right? He hasn't retired yet. And he walked us out into the courtyard and was pointing up at what would be the word for these things? They're around the walkways on the second floor, and they're kind of like these concrete defensive things. And he was talking about when these particular buildings were built and what was going on with like Kent State at the time, And I had walked past these things all the time. I never thought about that, and it blew my mind, So I think the place often has this very, very strong but unconscious or not recognized effect on us. And so when you start to actually pay attention to it and think about what it might be doing, it's really important, really, really powerful.
So I think for me, it was easier. The book is called Secret Jacksonville, so it kind of established that to start with. For me, what was more difficult was trying to narrow down stories that I thought reflected something, integral to the city and life in the city and all the different parts of the city. I tried to do a broad spectrum from, like all across the region. And that, it came first, but I did find that to be the most difficult part, was just kind of paring down a list of great stories that I wanted to tell to the ones that I thought really served, that were the most interesting, that were the most, just integral to telling the story of the city.
Yeah, like that. I think that I've always known that I was going to write about Jacksonville. It was my home. I grew up on the Trout River. We were always out on the water. The beaches are magical, and just the kind of people that, fished off of bridges while traffic whizzed past the rear ends. Those were my people, and I can't separate the characters from the place. I do think that Jacksonville as a place is also a character. And, I left, like I said, I lived in Orlando for 30, 35 years. I haven't done the math. I'm bad at math. But I know it was over 30 years. And coming back was just, like slipping on a warm coat that you've always loved. It just, a lot of things have changed and a lot of things are exactly the same. And I live a mile by water from the house I grew up in. It's written here. So I'm going to write, more about Jacksonville and Jack and Jack. Hi, Jack. Nice to meet you. When Tim and Joe started Jax by Jax, and then asked Brad and I to take over some of the, the work of it. I just felt like, oh, this is so special because the people here have such wonderful stories, and they're telling them. I'm sure there are writers out there that we may not know yet, but write those Jacksonville stories. I'm babbling on. What other questions do you have? Yes, ma'am.
So I think up here, or like your story really related to your personal past here. Do you want to talk about what it feels like when you're writing to make it personal, but not feel so attached to your work, like how you changed your name to Honey, and how it feels to kind of share that publicly, but also like make it not entirely you throughout the piece?
You're very perceptive to say that, you know, that act, changing the names and having something, a few things happen to the characters that didn't happen in real life. It's incredibly freeing. I had run into roadblocks like when I was writing as a memoir, I ran into roadblocks like, you know, well, what will my cousins think? And will this hurt, you know, mama's feelings? And you can just get so blocked by all that. And that's when Connie Mae said to me, change the names and make stuff up. And I went home, I even changed the name of Trout River to Bass River. So people who are reading the river, where is this woman? What is she talking about? There's no Bass River. But I did things like that just to make it fictional. And I combined characters. Chris in real life was a little boy. In the book, my best friend Kat, who used to beat me up regularly, is the one who got hit by the car. So you can do things like that. And it's incredibly freeing because they stop being your cousins and you're telling story. And if people are saying, oh, you know, you wrote about my daddy being a drunk and that embarrasses me. And I could say, well, that's not you because look, you never did this, you know? And so, you know, it makes it harder for people to object. And just for yourself, it really does for you. So I recommend it. I highly recommend it. Anyone else? Other questions? Yes.
So some of yours were a bit more personal than others, but I was wondering, how did you guys decide what stories that personally mattered to you or you found to be important? How did you pick those stories? Like, what about the stories made you go, this is what I'm gonna write about?
So, not just in terms of like what to read tonight, but what to write in the first place?
Either one.
No, okay. Man, I write probably too much. I'm pretty obsessive, you know? And as a matter of fact, you know, when I started my website, I started it as what I thought of as a nonfiction novel. And I wanted to write in this kind of postmodern sense, a book that was the size of the city. That was the idea that I had, and I split it up into a whole bunch of different stories instead, and started Jax Geo almost 10 years ago. And so I'm constantly looking for any place that resonates. And gosh, I don't know how. I guess, you know, I could probably chart the things that resonate with me somehow. There are a lot of them, you know. What things about Jacksonville stand out to me socially as far as our history with race, as far as religion here. I think I mentioned in that story that I grew up in a fundamentalist background, and I've written about that a lot. So those are things that I think some of the things that you write about, you have to write about because you kind of have to exercise your demons, whether you change the demons' names or not, you know? And then other things, you know, I don't know. I always have I always have a couple dozen stories in my head that I want to pursue. And I find that they all connect underground somehow, you know, so one thing will lead to another. And you probably feel like that too.
Yeah, definitely. For me, like it starts just kind of getting the spark of a story. As far as where they come from, it's all sorts of places. A lot of them are from friends and family. You know, a lot of people in this room, actually. Some of it's just a matter of hearing about something, and my wife and I will go explore it and visit it and dig deeper into it. Or reading Tim's website. Tim is cited in the book on the St. John's River monster. But when it came time to actually writing it, it was more a matter of collecting a big swath of stories that I liked, making a big list, and then cutting it down. And the way I decided that was I said, well, I want to do a couple of things. I want to make it some stuff that, that a lot of people really haven't heard before. But I also want to emphasize parts of our history that I think are really compelling. I knew that Black history, is just such an integral part of Jacksonville history. I knew that I had to have, a substantial portion of the stories we're going to be focused on that, and including in neighborhoods that are often neglected or just kind of underserved. So it was probably more a matter of, it was a matter of editing, of trimming down more than it was, picking things. Like I had some things that I knew that I wanted to include. There were some things like Sexy Rexy that I knew I couldn't get away with not including. And then it was a matter of deciding what else should go and what else I had to cut. And there's a lot of things that just kind of broke my heart to have to leave out, but you only have so much space, so you have to triage.
Some of the stories that I included in Sewing Holes had to do with things that I wanted to resolve about my own history, my own life. And I think Tim, I've said to Tim before, I don't think if we charted our family trees that they would connect, but I know we are cousins of the heart because he was raised, in this fundamentalist Christian background, and I was too. And I was, raised in a Southern Baptist church. And some of the things that, as a very small child, I would hear about, that women should be quiet and not speak up and take part. And then I would look at the way the church was run, and I knew that it was us doing all the work, and the men showing up and doing the preaching. And things like just parts of the religious doctrine that I was taught that I thought were just incredibly cruel. And yet, if you ever had a speck of trouble in your life, and I had a very sick brother and a very sick father, and those were the people that would show up at our house and feed us and love us and pay for funerals and, do things that were just so incredibly gracious and warm. Some of the best eating I've ever done in my life was, dinner on the grounds at Beverly Hills Baptist Church. And the characters that I grew up that were real people in my life were so contradictory like that. My papa, I mentioned in the thing, we never could prove it or anything like that. But I talk about in the book why we are pretty sure that he killed my grandmother. And yet at the same time, there at the end of his life, he wrote this incredibly large check. We didn't even know he had any money, and he wrote this check and built this little church because my grandmother, wanted a church there. So, I don't know, people are just complicated, and I wanted to tell their stories, and in telling their stories, I was telling my own. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
Okay.
think you guys could tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now, what your plans are? I know you mentioned Jax by Jax is coming up.
Oh, yes.
Some things to inform folks.
Yeah. Well, these gentlemen are going to be featured at Jax by Jax, I'll tell you that. On Friday night, October 15th, promptly at 7, is that right? Tim's play, Repossessions, Mass Shooting at Bay Meadows, will be featured, and it is an incredible play. You need to come out and see this. That's on Friday night. It's at the Jesse Ball DuPont Center in downtown Jacksonville. It used to be the Hayden Burns Library. For those of us old enough to know about Dark Shadows and Gunsmoke, you'll remember it as the Hayden Burns Library. But then the following day, October 16th, we start at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we will have 3 writing workshops, so you can come and make your choice of the 3. And then we hear from 8 writers in Jacksonville. Then we have in the middle, we have a student showcase, and there are going to be 5 students from UNF who are going to be there reading. Students from FSCJ, Douglas Anderson High School, and for the first time, we're going to have a reader from the Literacy Alliance. And I want everyone to look at every one of you in the eyes, because I want y'all to come out and support this man. He grew up, he was a middle-aged man, did not know how to read. His name is Marvin, and he came to the Literacy Alliance, and he learned to read, and now he's writing children's books. And he is going to read one of his children's books to us, so that will be incredibly wonderful. So please come out and support Marvin. Then we'll have 8 more writers, and in between you can buy books, have them sign, you can chat with authors, and then we'll have an after party at the end, so that'll be
fun. So yeah, this is actually the 8th Jax by Jax, and so I organized along with my wife Jo the first 4. And I'm not a very organized person, so somehow it happened. And then Brad and Darlene Kuhn generously took this over and professionalized it in ways that I don't think I ever could. If you look at jaxbyjax.com, you can see an event schedule. It's really, I always kind of compared it to, I don't know if you guys, when you were kids, ever read Choose Your Own Adventure books. But you like read to page 25, and if you want to do this, you go to page 79. If you want to do this, you go to page 108. There's so many different ways that you can choose, who and what to listen to and what to do at Jax by Jax, and I think it's really exciting. And the play that Darla mentioned, so it's going to be different. It was actually there was a full production at FSCJ a couple of years ago. This is not going to be that. It's going to be a dramatized reading. All of the people, all of the characters in the play are based on people who were there at the event in 1990. And I interviewed survivors and victims' families. And so those are the words that are in the play. It's really their story in a lot of different ways. I'm working on a couple of book projects that I don't want to say a whole lot about just yet, but I try to do a story a week for jaxpsychogeo.com. So please check it out. And one other thing that just real quickly, if I can add, I think oftentimes there is this assumption that if you're going to write about a place or if you're going to set a story somewhere, it has to be like one of a few places. It's got to be New York or Paris, or great. New York and Paris are wonderful. But I think that using a town like Jacksonville and investigating a town like Jacksonville connects to a lot of things that another New York story doesn't necessarily connect to. So, as far as some of my favorite writing, I love James Joyce's Dubliners. I love Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio. There's a writer named Joseph Mitchell. He's one of my favorite writers. Somebody asked him once, why do you only write about the little people? And he said, there are no little people. And so, I like to think that wherever you are in the world and wherever you find yourself, explore it, because that's where you are, explore it and find everything you can find. And the stories that are in a place where there are 1 million people, and it's going to be 200 years old next year, there's more stories that you could ever count or recount, Sorry, I kind of went off on a side tangent.
So I have a couple of events coming up connected to the book, a couple of readings, signings, and walking tours is one of my favorite things. You can read about them on jacksonmag.com. As far as writing, we have stories every weekday on jacksonmag.com. And our print magazine, Edible Northeast Florida Magazine, comes out 6 times a year.
I forgot to mention what I'm working on now, and I think it's kind of important, especially if there are writing students in the room. I am working on the screenplay for Sewing Holes, and I will tell you that I am on revision 7, and revision 7 of the manuscript, we've finally gotten up to where it's pretty bad. It's so hard. Oh my goodness. When you're writing a novel or a story or a poem, you can get right inside people's heads and you can tell what they're thinking and, have them react against one another. In a movie script, if the audience doesn't see it or hear it, it didn't happen. And so you have to figure out, this isn't superheroes flying in and cars are exploding and, all that stuff going on and fire and whatnot. It's people relating to other people. And it's really hard to just show that, with the tools that you have, but I find it fascinating. And my commitment to Jacksonville is that we are going to make this movie. We're going to make it in Jacksonville. It's going to be good. People are going to buy their popcorn and sit and eat it, and they're going to laugh and they're going to cry and they're going to go out and tell their friends and bring them back to the theater, because probably revision 100, it will be worth, producing. And I'm telling you that so that it's not easy, but if it were easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. It wasn't easy for Marvin to learn to read at his ripe old age, but he did it. And I just say keep after it. And someone was talking about that they write. I believe it was you. You said that you write really long and have to cut. Yeah, that's my practice as well. I will write a poem that just goes on and on and on and on, and then just cut and cut and cut. And when you finally get down to the essence of the poem, that's when you have it. So, the work of writing is in the revising. That first draft that seems so wonderful, look at it the next day and keep working.
Folks, please stay, have some refreshments, talk to the writers, talk to one another. This is our community. Please give our writers one more hand. And there are books in the back, so while you got them here to sign them.